NSFW, Reddit, what was your O sheet? This person is a psychopath moment when meeting people? I was friends with a couple. The wife made up an affair with me to hurt the husband's feelings. The husband showed up in my condo with a gun and was detained by the security guards and later the police. I had no idea about any of it until later when the condo security contacted me. Was chatting away with a guy in a pub. Seemed like a normal nice dude, got on really well. Some point in the conversation he casually mentions he's not long out the jail for torturing a guy. He never said torturing, he said what it was he did to him. He slipped it into the conversation so casually as if he was telling me about running to the shop for a pint of milk. Never saw it coming. Asked around another day and confirmed he wasn't full of shit. Had something similar happen when I was in college. The guy I was chatting with seemed fairly genuine and also just casually brought up he had gotten out of prison for second-degree murder. Afterwards he asked me what I was going to school for and I answered honestly criminal justice. It was a fair exchange of being honest with one another that he said if I were a cop, which I'm not and never plan to be, he would respect our encounter just based off of treating each other like humans. We continued our conversation and asked him what helped him during his time in and he answered religion and studying. He ended up being a foreman for a construction company and assimilating well emo. It was an Uber driver. My wife and I took an Uber down to the bars one weekend. Once he picked us up I could easily tell he was on something. While we were crossing a bridge on the interstate, about halfway to our destination, he says isn't it crazy that I could swerve off the road until us alright now. I told him to get off on the next exit and cancelled the ride. I also reported him to Uber so hopefully nobody has to get in a car with that lunatic again. Really should have kept that intrusive thought to himself. I met the new boyfriend of an acquaintance and within 10 minutes of the conversation he was referring to women as holes. It was amazing how I suddenly remembered that my husband had requested I come help him with something. She came late to our date, immediately ordered a drink and burger, then told me she was late because of a family thing. Before the burger arrived she mentioned she'd have to cut our date short because she was having a family dinner. I was like, okay, all good. Then she told me that the craziest thing had happened where her sister met a dude on Tinder and they ended up going to a family barbecue and it ended up with them getting married. Before her burger even arrived, she said, wouldn't it be funny to pull a prank on my family? Like, you and me went to my family barbecue and let everyone assume we were really hitting it off and they'd totally think we were gonna get married. I'll admit I'm also the psychopath in this story cause I went. Good mashed potatoes. She spent all night introducing me as her future fiancé and I had to take a Tinder break after that. At a party once I met a friend of a friend who worked as a nurse at a local hospital. She was of the sort who would sigh heavily and use the unique stresses of her job to bring her the attention she was looking for. She took the spotlight with pleasure and started talking about how hard her job was. When I asked if there were things she liked about her job, she beamed and explained that she worked primarily in maternity. However, her anecdotes had nothing to do with mothers or infants. She spoke primarily of how wonderful it was to be in charge of these women's lives. She explained how fragile they were in those moments, and how even after delivery she was the only one on the floor for hours who would be able to forecast if there was going to be life-changing complications. She absolutely glowed as she explained how these people's lives were in her hands. The conversation steered in other directions amongst partygoers, but she reclaimed it on the topic of high school experiences. She shared an anecdote on how she was rejected for an advanced choir position, and blamed it solely on the poor judgment of the instructor. Years later, she got to sing at the instructor's funeral. I'll never forget the pride she took in having control over other people's lives. It struck me as the most basic display of evil. I, 20F, was dating this dude, 23M, for a few months and we were getting on really well. Then we both ended up having to move for our jobs at around the same time. He wants to try long distance so we do. We call most days and watch movies together in our off time. The time zones mess it up a little bit but it wasn't too bad. Out of the blue one day he just says he doesn't want to be together. I'm like wow okay, a little blindsided but sure. So I start just going about normal life again and hanging out with friends, the normal post-relationship stuff. After about a month, he begs, like absolutely begs to get back together. Movie type stuff, sending flowers to me at work, sending handwritten cards almost daily across thousands of miles, and even bought me a ticket to fly out to see him. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll go and see what he has to say. Worst case scenario, I just fly home. So I got a ticket for 2 days after because I just figured I could head out if he was being a big dick. He picks me up from the airport and is basically how he used to be. Just telling me he missed me and he regretted it as soon as it happened and it was the biggest mistake of his life, the usual. So we stay with his family because he's like, oh please don't get a hotel. I already feel bad enough about the whole month. Just stay with us. And I just thought, hey, free room I guess. Everything is completely fine for the first few days and then I get this alert on my phone. And it's a hurricane warning and saying they're pushing my flight for 4 days later. I'm like, crap. I need to get back to work. I only took like 3 days. When he gets back to the house from work, I tell him about it and he's like, oh, I know. We already started boarding up the windows. I was a little freaked out but not too much because I guess that's normal for big hurricanes. So the next morning, he shakes me and wakes me up and tells me to come to the living room. I was like, okay. When I do, it's him, his 2 brothers, his sister, his mom, and his dad, people I have only met on this one instance, and he has a binder. They sit me down and each of them reads a passage from the binder of why we shouldn't be together, and why I need to move on, and he breaks up with Annie, in his parents' house, in front of his siblings, in the middle of a hurricane power outage. Then, because of the hurricane, I was stuck there for 4 more days with these freaks. Probably not the most psychopath person I've met but this story is still just so strange to me, I had to post it. Edit, the most psychopathic person was a friend from high school whose whole family peed in the bathtub. The toilet was only for number 2. After moving to a new city a few years ago, my best friend came to visit. We're both 30-something dudes. We were out at a bar when a guy asked to sit with us because there weren't any free tables outside. Fine. Being polite, we start talking to the guy. He told us he was a truck driver just stopping overnight in town, and at some point mentioned he was ex-military. From there, things began to get strange, but slowly, like the proverbial frog in water being brought to a boil. Not only was he in the military, but he had a brother, it might have been a twin, I can't recall, who was in the CIA, embedded in Russia. My friend and I also gradually got the sense that this guy was a little too interested in us. We eventually closed our tabs and decided to go to a different bar, but the guy stuck with us, telling increasingly tall tales about his time in the military. He eventually confessed that there was no brother, he was the spy who'd been embedded in Russia. What struck me was how, even though his stories got more and more ridiculous, his demeanor was deadly serious, if a bit overwrought. And the intensity was starting to make my skin crawl. Not only that, but he was starting to pick fights with other people at the bar, deliberately being belligerent. Over time, he started to radiate this menacing air that hadn't been apparent when we first started talking to him. He didn't get angry directly at us, but it was like he was demonstrating how scary he could be, and suggesting we stay on his good side. Finally, he took me aside and slipped into a, not very convincing, Russian accent. Alas, he was never a spy for the US. He was a double agent, a one-man Russian sleeper cell. But he couldn't bear lying to me, he had to come clean. Even though we had open tabs at the bar, my friend and I waited until the guy went to the bathroom, abandoned our cards and dipped, post-haste. My ex-fiancé told me that if I were to get pregnant with a girl before a boy, he would push me down the stairs and make me miscarry so we could have a boy first, as many times as it took. We broke up, and afterwards he convinced me to talk things over with him. I got into his car and he proceeded to calmly explain to me that it didn't matter if I took him back or not as he headed to the expressway. I asked him where we were going and he remained absolutely silent. He started gaining speed, but the pitch in his voice never changed when he finally spoke and began a diatribe about our love and how we would be together forever, no matter how many people wanted to pull us apart and no matter if I saw it yet or not. I again asked him where we were going, and he said a neighboring state where no one would know or find us, with a very creepy smile, one that lives in my mind to this day but I can't recreate. All very calm. I had to call my mother and she had to talk him down, beg him to bring me back home. Added bonus, when I was back home and refused to see him, he stood outside my family home through all hours of the night and started singing songs to me over the phone about how he was going to burn my house down and kill everyone inside if I wouldn't go outside and talk to him. When I turned down a guy while walking back to my car with groceries in hand, and when I got to my car he pulled up next to mine and kept asking for a hug. I was like duck no in my head but told him I got a boyfriend, sorry. He left and I got in my car and kept an eye out to make sure his car wasn't following mine. His van was blacked out too, not trying to stereotype cars but just made it creepier. I mean, an all blacked out van? When my ex's dad told the story of the time he put a wet towel on top of an anthill, and then threw the towel at my ex. The wet towel stuck to her skin and she was immediately covered with ants, who bit her all over her body. He was laughing when he told the story, like it was the funniest prank. My ex told him that it actually hurt a lot and it traumatized her quite a bit, and he just said, well, I'm okay because I already asked God for forgiveness. My friends Fee and Kay went on a rant about how Charles Manson didn't deserve to be in jail because he didn't kill anyone. He just went off with no precursor to the conversation. He started it himself. I tried to ignore him and he kept coming at me and trying to convince me that he was right, and I knew it, but I just wanted to be politically correct. My friend has since passed away and I steer all the way clear of that guy. I was causally dating a guy for roughly 5 months. I moved into a new apartment and had sent him pictures of the interior before I moved. He went on a trip to Scotland and got upset that I wasn't answering his FaceTimes in the middle of the night. I decided I wasn't interested in pursuing anything further because of his persistent pestering and insecurities. I had moved in and was working on unpacking when suddenly, I got a knock at my door. He found where I was living with just a picture of the hardwood floors and some windows. I don't have my location for my photos turned on, so there's no way he could have found it from something simple. He saw absolutely nothing creepy about it and proceeded to push the door and beg me to let him inside. I promptly shut and locked the door, then made sure he heard my shotgun big dig. He left and I haven't heard from him, thankfully. I walk my dog at the same time daily. You tend to bump into the same people, routines and all that. See a woman with a Bernese Mountain Dog on a rope lead. I've not seen her before and this dog is at least twice her size, so I'm a bit cautious about opening the gates to the park. Assure myself it's fine. She can control it and I'm just being needlessly anxious. As I open the gate and go through with my Jack Russell, I watch as the mountain dog bolts towards us barking. The woman holding him gets pulled off her feet and lands on her shoulder hard with a loud groan. Quickly scoop my dog and go back through the gate, slamming it shut behind me as I can hear this woman yelling over "It's okay. He's friendly. He just wants to say hello." As this big bastard is jumping up at the gate barking and snarling. As I back away from the gate, she yells up from the ground, "I'm a ducking pussy. Don't be such a pussy, say hello. He just wants to play with your dog." Such a surreal turn of events. I have no idea what the hell was going on with her or that hellhound, but decided to walk quickly home with my dog and leave her on the ground with the snarling hound at the gate. This was about 3 years ago now, but I still wonder what the heck this woman's plan was, and did she just want me to get attacked or my dog attacked? A few months back I ended things with a close friend. We had known each other since sophomore year of high school, so we practically grew up together. A little while into our friendship he was very dependent on relationships, and when they would end he'd spiral really badly. One relationship in particular made him absolutely crumble. I would help through the grief process, but it became intense and his need for comfort became suffocating, that even his own mother would call me to comfort her son. And if I had no time or just wasn't comforting enough, he would lash out and yell. Even called me once to show me how he ripped and stabbed his ex's belongings that were left at his house. At that moment I began to see his true colors. One day we were talking and I had brought up a past argument that I thought was funny. He got mad and lashed out saying, well, I didn't know it would hurt your feelings. It took me aback and just something clicked in me that I couldn't have a person like that in my life. Months passed and I'm approached by a friend who is friends with him. She ends up telling me that he has a police report and has been reported to his college for spreading CP of his ex. It was a shock because I had no idea he had dated a minor. That's when I realized, oh shit, he's a psychopath. Went on a date with a guy almost 5 years ago. I had just gotten divorced and was very excited, so I was definitely missing some huge red flags I would never miss now. He told me he had pet turtles as a kid and wouldn't clean their tanks. Ever. The water became so filthy that the turtles were just living, breathing infections. To the point their eyes were just gone. Swimming around blind, in pain, in their own fesses. And he would just watch and basically laugh at them. It was absolutely fucking disturbing. He laughed while telling me this story. I genuinely believe he told this to me because he thought I would also find it hilarious. This was one of many red flags from this dude. Ended up being married with kids and everything too. Side note, I have noticed a lot of people saying these random confessions from these psychopaths come up without being prompted. Just so randomly. And that's honestly the scariest part. Like they can literally talk about these things to complete strangers they are supposedly wanting to impress, hear themselves talking about it out loud and cannot sense how goddamn batshit crazy they sound. I was at a party playing beer pong, and some dude came up to me and my buddy, then asked if we knew what it was like to kill a man. Obviously we said no, but laughed it off thinking he was just drunk like we all were. Then his eyes changed. He said something about power or whatever and I slipped away. Talked to someone else at the party who knew that guy and he said yeah he was in the Marines, and he was never right after coming back. Probably wasn't born a psychopath, but unfortunately became one in the desert. Hooked up with an older woman when I was 25 and just out of a long-term relationship. I could tell she got feelings immediately and so I broke it off cause that's not what I was looking for. A couple months later she gets arrested for hitting her boyfriend over the head with a frying pan. Really dodged a frying pan with that one. I was helping a friend after she had an outpatient surgery but still needed eyes kept on her just in case. Her boyfriend at the time started talking with his friend that he invited over knowing she was having this surgery about raping her and how she wouldn't know any better because of the drug. Also they talked about stealing her pain pills. They thought I couldn't hear them talking in the living room but I don't know if it would have made a difference if they knew I could hear them or not. I did not leave her side until I knew she was fully conscious. When I told her what he said she wasn't even surprised and sent me home. We are no longer friends for different reasons. My first husband came home on Christmas Day drunk and high. He confessed to me that he was disappointed that all the abuse he had been giving me hadn't caused me to unalive myself yet and to hurry up because he wanted to find my body. I noped out of there that day. I'm still alive, and it's been 24 years. So, my cousin told me this wild story about what happened at her job. She had a co-worker who seemed fine at first, but over time, his behavior started to raise serious red flags. He was incredibly charming and seemed to get along well with everyone, but it quickly became clear that he was using his charm to manipulate people. He would take credit for others' work, sabotage team projects to make himself look better, and even leak confidential information to competitors. One time, he intentionally messed with presentation equipment and files just to undermine a colleague and then took credit for saving the day. Eventually, after a series of incidents, HR had to step in. They couldn't disclose specific details about his condition due to confidentiality, but they did reveal that his behavior was linked to a serious personality disorder. They fired him, and the whole team was left in shock. My cousin said it was a real eye-opener and made everyone more cautious about who they trusted in the workplace. New girl started at my job. Very normal conversations and whatnot until she goes missing a few days later. Girl staged her own kidnapping to see if her boyfriend truly loved her. Apparently drove herself to nearby city, ran to a house, and told the PPL she escaped her trunk. Police came to question her and the story didn't add up, leading to her confession. Hope her BF got far away as possible. I have a coworker who is insane and says wild things on almost a daily basis. Recent highlights include bragging about stealing a car, proudly declaring she won't sleep with a man who showers regularly. She needs them to stink. Weekly stories of road rage altercations on her way to and from work. Sounds like they've been escalating recently, to buying into almost every wild conspiracy theory you can think of defending famous adult men who are sexual predators. Because quote, if I were a 13-year-old girl I would totally be throwing myself at him too, so I don't really consider that a victim. That's something I really would have wanted at that age. To top it off, she said almost all of these things in front of very important clients. I truly don't understand how she still has a job. Like I said, these are just recent occurrences and only scratch the surface. My fellow co-workers and I are constantly in awe of the shit that comes out of her mouth. I used to work in a financial office in downtown San Francisco. There was a woman who worked there who sometimes ate lunch at the same time as I did and we chat about stuff. We had some overlapping taste in books, movies, etc. So we'd talk about that. One day she started this really serious discussion about how she thought that all homeless people should be taken somewhere and shot because they were a negative to society and would never be wanted or useful. I thought she was trying to be hyperbolic in some kind of jokey way for a few minutes, though that kind of shock behavior wasn't really like her. After a few minutes of this, I figured out, no, that's just what she believes, and how she's comfortable enough around me to let that show. We argued about it for a while because that's a shitty, insane take, and then lunch was over. We never sat together and talked again. I made sure of that. Interviewing a crazy rich 16-year-old kid for an internship. His dad was a trustee, and he never broke eye contact or smiled once. I asked about his hobbies and he said I run a small import-export business for restaurant equipment without changing his tone at all. We were told we had to hire him and yeah, he was just as incompetent and resistant to feedback as you might imagine. Eater for y'all who just, for some reason, would rather pick at someone's story than just read it. The kid did in fact get expelled from his very high-profile high school for some gross shit he did to another student. He's not just a socially awkward kid. And Jesus ducking Christ, some of y'all need therapy for the way you're coming after me over a story on a dumb Reddit thread. Some people have war in their countries. I live in a nursing home and yesterday I saw a 60-something-year-old male resident coming out of a much older, blind woman's room and asked him if he was lost. He went ballistic, raised his cane in the air and threatened to bash my head in. Actually assaulted me with his other hand and I had to block his attack as I was trying to record on my phone, and assured me that if he decided to hit me I'd be dead. Psychopath? Very possibly. Actually crazy? No. Just your standard abusive older male asshole, an unfortunate reoccurrence in my life thus far. I had PTSD flashbacks and nightmares all night in which my stepfather's face and this guy's were intertwined as they were beating the shit out of me. Decided to call the non-emergency police number this morning to report it, because management isn't in until Tuesday and that's just too far away. They're going to come talk to him and I'll be sleeping with my bedroom door locked until further notice. I, male 31, went on a date with a 28F. Went out on a first date. She showed up an hour late to a date at a nice restaurant. I decided to order when she was 45 minutes late cause I assumed she wasn't coming. She was texting me every 10 minutes saying she was 10 minutes away. She shows up drunk. I ask her where she was. She says she was at the bar next door drinking with her ex who happened to be there. She then proceeds to yell at me for ordering food without her. Then continues on to tell me that now that I'm talking to her I'm not allowed to communicate to women unless she approves it. And if I have friends who are married or have girlfriends she needs to vet them first before I can continue hanging out with them. I stayed mostly silent while she ranted about being super hot and no man can handle her. After I finished my meal I said I needed to go to the bathroom. I left and never came back. I blocked her upon leaving the restaurant and never talked to her again. I've never done anything like that in my life. I always pay for the meal on the first date. But this girl deserved it. Before I was prescribed the right psych meds, I used to do a lot of armed robberies, robbed a lot of drug dealers, carjacked numerous people. I don't know if I fit this description though, because I was in my 20s with manic bipolar, highly violent tendencies, and I feel bad about what I used to. I got what was coming to me. I was shot point blank in my right calf and stabbed in the neck. Had to fight for the steering wheel as my mother told me she was just going to hill us both and drove into oncoming traffic. That one will stick with you. She's now begging me to come live and take care of her. Yes, that is what crazy looks like. I was talking to a guy on Bumble. I live in NY, very near to where the LI serial killer lived, and Jilgo Beach is 20 minutes from me, but mind you there's dozens of beaches around me. LI. As we were messaging at 1 AM I kept getting these vibes. I thought maybe it's just me being dramatic. I explain how beautiful it is and I'm sitting outside enjoying the weather. He asks me if I've ever been to the beach at night. I'm like, not in a long time. He says, I'd love to take you to Jilgo Beach late at night. You would never want to leave, and you could stay there forever. I'm like, wait, Jilgo Beach? You couldn't have said any other beaches? You understand why that seems a bit concerning? Hoping he was joking. He said, well, if you don't want to go willingly it won't be as beautiful. Meanwhile I'm searching on Bumble to report him and he had deleted his account, so I blocked him. This was just last week, so YAY for online dating lol. I was on the bus in college and met this relatively handsome guy. We seemed to hit it off. He was charming and funny, until he brought up how he'd seen something absolutely hilarious recently on the internet and started telling me about how he couldn't stop laughing about how they grind up male chicks alive to make chicken nuggets and how he watched the process, and it was so funny. I counted myself lucky that I never saw him again. When I went on a first date after talking to him for months, he was wearing a hat. On the second date, he had a bandana. I just thought he had a bad haircut or something, but should have asked. Well, he'd a demonic ram's horns tattooed on his skull. He said it was to scare people when he goes back to prison. A few years later I saw him on the news being arrested. But it was just for protesting. I have a new manager that keeps doing this weird thing. He's like a pathological liar or something, and keeps claiming he did things other people did. But he gets mixed up and will tell you to your face he did something that you yourself did or said. Like a few hours before I spent the morning rearranging something, and when he started up a conversation with me he said he took the morning to rearrange said area, even though he wasn't there. It's starting to wig me out. Not on the levels of these stories, and probably not a psychopath, but it's really strange how he seems to believe himself. A guy who lived up the street from me was always doing bad shit when we were kids. Stealing, fighting, selling drugs, you name it, this kid did it. He stole my bike on day, my dad had to get it back. Fast forward 15 years I hear he's been arrested. Turns out he got into an argument with a professional football player in a club. He chased the football player down and held him on the street. I was working in a homeless shelter and some big lump with black eyes barricaded the door, sat opposite to me, told me how easy it would be for him to heal me. This went on for 15 minutes. Somebody kicked the door in at some point and he snapped out of it. He was definitely a psychopath. There wasn't any light in him at all. Found out from his records the following day that he'd done 10 years in a South African jail for butchering his neighbor and burying him in his own garden. I was at a bus stop one sunny day a few years ago, heading into town. One of the very few other people at the stop was a young man with dark hair. He caught my attention when he made a passing comment to me about how unpredictable the buses could be, and I turned my head to smile and acknowledge it. I won't soon forget his face. He was smiling at me, but it was a really intense grin, what horror writers call a rectus. His eyes looked darkly intense, and when he smiled you could see all of his teeth. I'm a big guy, several inches taller and likely much stronger than him, but there was something about his gaze and his intense facial expression that I found very unsettling. It was like I was looking at a mask, and as if I knew that his quip and his broad grin completely belied his actual emotional state, and his actual pleasantness. I disengaged from the exchange as fast as I was able and didn't do anything to draw attention to myself again. I'd never met that guy before and I haven't seen him since, and have no wish to. I don't know what his issue was, if he had a disorder of some kind, or was coming down from some wild drug bender, but that day I caught a glimpse of something that every fiber of my intuition was telling me was a very dangerous man. If I were told that one person I'd met in my life was actually an alien in disguise and I had to guess who, then that guy would be near the top of a very, very short list. When I got into the car with the guy I was newly seeing, it all started fine until he began asking odd hypothetical questions like how fast do you think we'd have to be driving to die on impact if we were to hit that pole, and as we'd pass any tree he started commenting on the size of them and would rate it out of 10 in terms of how good it'd be on the die on impact scale. I'm always down for a good hypothetical, but his cold emotionless stare and the escalating excitement in his voice as he found a good tree and talked about the prospect of us dying definitely rang my oh shit. This person is a psychopath and I'm stuck in a car with them alarm bells. I once met a woman who just so happened to be in a polyamorous relationship. Whatever, I don't judge. My boyfriend at the time, we'll call him Jake, and her husband both got along well and so we all became friends. The dynamic wasn't any different than any other platonic friendship between two couples, but do note, she was a psychologist, as her profession comes into play later in the story. After about a month of doing totally normal friendship things, we were all at a huge Halloween party and Jake and Amp, her husband, were chilling on the couch across the large room when she told me, "Jake adores you. You mean so much to him and I just think your bond is so special." I looked at Jake from across the room, gave him a wink, blew him a kiss, and continued mingling with people as she casually walked back to Jake and Amp, her husband. The next thing I know, her husband is walking over to me and throwing himself at me, while she's straddling Jake on the couch. Appalled and in shock of what was going on, I kept trying to break away from her husband and make my way over to that couch, but he was holding me back and I struggled to break free from what became him assaulting me in a corner. I later found out that when she walked back to Jake after I blew him that kiss, winked at him from across the room, she had told him, her husband, that I was okay with trying swinging, but just once for Halloween. Her moving on to Jake plus her husband moving on to me was both swift and forceful. It happened so fast and the atmosphere didn't allow for an immediate clean breakaway. There's no doubt in my mind that they planned this, and needless to say, we never spoke again afterwards. I also broke up with Jake. Furthermore, I found out that this sideshow is working in a marriage counseling mental health practice, specializing in sexual abuse trauma. She's out there creating the problem that people go to her to help fix. Insane.